the final beat of the show was this accordion vocal requiem, and my goal really was to counter this spirit of hopefulness that was kept alive for 100 years and counting. That struck me as kind of, like I said before, a refusal to bury what is dead, and embedded in that, this kind of denial of loss, a denial of the learning that needs to happen.
We all are gonna die. 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 Why don't we help each other prepare for it? Without death there could not be life. I'm talking about end of life conversations, conversations about the end of life. Death and dying, grief and loss, conversations about the end of life.
Hey, everybody, we want to interrupt this episode to ask for some help.
Yes, indeed. We would like to add value to our podcast for you, our beloved community, as we move into our third year.
How cool is
of
that?
being here.
30 years. Well,
3 years.
just starting our third year. We're very excited about that. So we really do. We want to add some value. And we'd love to have as many as possible of you go to our podcast notes and click on the link to take just a few minutes to do a survey for us and tell us what would make it more valuable for you. So we look
Yeah,
forward to hearing from you.
and don't hesitate. Whatever is on your heart, there's a little space there that you can add your thoughts about what you'd like to hear more about. Maybe, even if it's books or music, whatever, just
Yeah.
let us know, because we are here to in support of you,
Yeah.
our listeners. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Thank you. Well, hello and welcome, everybody. I am the Reverend Wakil David Matthews, and I am very excited today to welcome my soon-to-be son-in-law, Asher Smith. Asher, who uses they, them pronouns, describes himself as a queer farmer, disgraced biologist — I want to hear more about that one — an occasional theater maker.
Yes, thank you so much for being here with us, Asher. And welcome, everyone. I am the Reverend Mother Ana Luisa Armendariz. Asher's master thesis in food studies was a collection of 3 immersive performances that wove together human and wild stories to build a connection between audience members and Pennsylvania's forests. Asher resides in their hometown of Philadelphia and will soon be moving to a farm nearby on the Delaware River.
Yeah. The exciting news was a bit ago was from our daughter Wendy and my daughter Nina and her fiance Asher, and they had their offer accepted for a new farm north of Philadelphia.
Yay!
That's pretty exciting. We're glad to hear that. And of course, we'll put a note in the podcast notes with your permission to your master's thesis, so people can read more about that. It was really fascinating, and I really enjoyed it. So we always like to ask about becoming aware of death, but actually maybe just combine that with specifically in your research. What did you find out about, and when was it really kind of triggered all this for biological extinctions or threats to biology? And maybe it's yourself, if you remember when you first became aware of death in your life.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question. As a lot of this stuff is before I feel like I had much cognition going on. But I feel that it was taught to me at a pretty young age, growing up in a time of climate change, that like things are dying and the world is under threat. I watched a lot of Animal Planet growing up. I was a voracious viewer of the Amazon rainforest and the African savannas, and these sorts of things that they put on TV. And I think in this at that time that I was a kid in the early 2000s, there was kind of always at least a tag at the end of like, these places are disappearing, or there's poachers and the white rhino is going extinct.
Mhm.
So this is something I think about a lot, that my ecological consciousness and that of my generation, it was almost something, before I can remember learning about it,
Mhm.
the death of species, the death of,
Mhm.
our biosphere in some ways, or at least the threatened existence, is something that was totally baked into my upbringing.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we hear that from young people a lot. Yeah. So, I can I can only imagine, and because I'm not as young, but having spoke to my kids and other people, that's just gotta be a huge part of kind of the background of your life in a way, and maybe the
Mhm.
background angst, you know? Yeah.
Well, and I have 2 children who are younger than you, Asher, and they each in their own time went through a period where they were really hyper stressed. And I don't wanna say hyper stressed as to diminish it, but, like, my son suddenly was really stressed about trash
Hmm.
and was, like, trying to bring trash home from the streets and restaurants. And, it was interesting because he was worried about animals in bodies of water that would
Mm.
be, having a hard time with all the plastics and stuff. And I remember people being like, adults would be like, "Oh, just knock it off, like, tell him to stop it and, get that out of him." And instead, we created, like, his own little receptacle that he could actually figure out where to put the recycling through, and he got to, like, talk it through, and he's built, like, little altars for the Brazilian rainforest and stuff. And I feel like, yeah, you are young. Everybody who is listening is experiencing, like, what is going on around us with all this information. So, how has all of this settled into you, and how has it impacted the story of your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental question for me,
Mhm.
where yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even know how to separate, the idea of, the profound responsibility of care for the earth, and, the weight that has sort of gone onto all decisions of my life. And of
That's
course,
right.
it's worth saying that that has been the case for all generations,
Yeah,
forever,
yeah, yeah.
as
Mhm.
long as we have had the agency to make decisions. Um, but this added layer of kind of catastrophe looming, that's kind of an additional emotional question. You talked about the stress, and I do think that that's an issue, generationally, of the kind of the overwhelm.
Mhm.
If you are
Mhm.
if you are going to take on, you know, the pain and the mourning that's required of this moment that is
Mhm.
globalized, it's kind of more than one human, more than one body and story
Mhm.
can contain. Um, so I kind of have gone through periods of my life, when I was younger, maybe in late teenager, where I was trying to take on that task of, understanding and rising to the occasion of
Hmm.
the death of an entire biosphere by human activities.
Mhm.
And that is something that I relatively quickly learned that, I need to discard,
Mm.
um, and, you know, figure out what on the scale of my life, what am I able to learn and to accumulate, or communicate rather.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And, that kind of leads into, the thesis that I did, and then these sorts of,
Mhm.
you know, artistic communication
Mhm.
projects that we'll get into.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Well, let's go
Perfect
ahead and
segue.
yeah, yeah, very good job, very good job. Yeah, why don't you tell us more about that? Tell us more about your master's thesis. Any stories you want to share about, biodiversity loss that you've learned about? And like I said, we'll put a link to that in the podcast notes so people can see that brilliant work you did. I really enjoyed reading it myself. So, um, but tell us more.
Yeah, so my master's thesis was in the Department of Food Studies at Chatham, and my whole experience there was interweaving a few different aspects of my life that had come before it. One as a biologist, a former biologist, who had studied wildflowers and phytoplankton, kind of in that realm of like scientific observation and publication, and mixing that with my theatrical experience in making devised performances, making sort of experimental theater that is very kind of integrated with the audience, transformative experiential things. And then lastly, kind of adding my experience as a farmer. I'm a beginning farmer. I started a few years before I went to grad school. So I have about 3 seasons of farming under my belt now, and incorporating, just my experiences working with the land, learning to relate to plants in a more participatory way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so the thesis itself, it includes 3 different performances. Each is about a specific plant that's native to the area I was living in, which is Western Pennsylvania. Um, and I think the one that is of most interest here, as we're talking about end of life, is the American chestnut, which I could also share more about that specific story if you like.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
please.
share it. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very complex story, and it's a third of my thesis, so I'll try to rein it in. But the American chestnut is a species of tree native to eastern North America. It grew from Maine to Georgia, kind of out until the Mississippi. Um, it was a highly important food source for people who were indigenous here from, over 10,000 years ago. And then later was also an important food source for settlers, European settlers who lived in this area. And some estimates say that American chestnuts made up a quarter of all trees in the eastern woodland. They were
Wow.
highly prolific tree. They call them the redwoods of the East. They were, in the southern parts of their range, just giant, godlike trees. And very unfortunately, in the early 20th century, some Asiatic species of chestnut were imported to, I believe, the New York Botanical Garden or Zoo, and they carry a chestnut blight. That this blight is a fungal disease that coexisted with Chinese and Korean chestnut species, and so they were able to kind of cope with that well. But the American trees had never seen this disease before, and so that allowed this huge vulnerability to end up wiping out every single tree that existed on this continent.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there was no single tree that did not get the disease. However, chestnuts now are kind of in this purgatory state almost, where the disease can only work on the above ground portion of the tree. So their root systems are all over, right? All over that range. And they send up shoots that can live for a time, sometimes even living long enough to produce nuts. But it's kind of this inevitability. The blight will sort of, travel back up and will knock down those new shoots. And so this leaves them in this kind of interesting space where there was a big period of mourning for the chestnut that occurred when this disease first came through. And then there was this huge resurgence of hope when the first sprouts came back. And then this additional round of mourning when they realized that light was
They're
still
not going to
here.
make it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's these efforts to use, specialized breeding techniques and to use genetic engineering to make the chestnut viable again.
Mm.
So a big part of what my performance is about is like kind of this refusal to bury the chestnut in a sense, kind of hanging on to this possibility that it can be resurrected somehow through technology.
Wow.
But Asher, so the tree's actually trying to do something itself too, right? Like it sends up a shoot every once in a while. Do you think it's reconfiguring its own genetic like awareness? Do you think it's like working on it or
Yeah, I mean, on the level of genetics, it's pretty stymied because it's just so rare that a tree would get old enough to be able to reproduce. They're obligate outcrossers, so you need to have sort of two of these trees in the same place,
pollination?
same time, that both reach mature age. And it's a
Interesting.
forest tree we're talking about, so it's many years. But otherwise, it's just it's still the same, kind of sending up clones of itself.
I find that such an interesting metaphor for the way the settler colonialists wiped out many of the tribes that lived here. Similarly, they came over with diseases that they had never experienced, right? And alcohol. But just to, it's just a really interesting parallels that between those two things. And so, would you be willing to maybe describe a little bit one of those plays, those performances?
So this performance about the American chestnuts, it was sort of a guided walk through the forest, and the piece was created in collaboration with 7 different chestnut trees. A couple of them were these large, mature Chinese chestnuts that were producing tons of nuts, and those are the chestnuts that I used to feed people in the performance. And then also going to some of the American chestnuts in the forest. That included a standing dead tree and the stumps of 2 quite large trees that had been recently cut down because they were dying from blight. And then the ending spot was going to this living American chestnut shoot. And the whole performance, I had audience members read newspaper clippings from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. This was a performance in Pittsburgh. And we looked at newspaper articles from the 1800s to today that I had sort of embedded in the landscape. And we were sort of moving through, and this was during the harvest season, which is in autumn, so it was like really gorgeous time to be in the forest. And my role was to kind of hold the presence of the mourner, to see the loss and feel it. As we went to these different sites, I was placing stones at the foot of these trees, which is a Jewish practice of stones at grave sites. And as we moved from place to place, I also sang to these trees. The final beat of the show was this accordion vocal requiem that I had composed using some material from Mozart's famous requiem. That was sort of just expressing the depth of the loss. And my goal really was to counter this spirit of hopefulness that was kept alive for 100 years and counting. That struck me as kind of as, like I said before, a refusal to bury what is dead, and as embedded in that, this kind of denial of loss, a denial of the learning that needs to happen, of, we can't bring the disease in and then think, well, it's okay because we can undo it.
Mm.
You know, maybe there's, there will always be possibility for remediation of some sorts and for restoration in the forest. But that first step of acknowledging wrongdoing, acknowledging harm, and that there's
Mm.
like real effect of that kind of needs to be the first step,
Yeah.
especially as like reconciling settler relationships in this
Right.
area.
Yeah. Beautiful. Is there a recording of that requiem?
Uh, only in the voice notes of my phone, trying to
Okay, it would be
record it.
lovely. It'd be
But
lovely to hear it. But anyway,
yeah.
if you do make one, let me know and I can put it in the podcast notes as well.
Hmm.
So as your how many performances did you do?
Of American chestnuts
Uh-huh.
specifically, there were just two.
2. And were people they were walking from tree to tree, right, alongside you?
Hmm.
And did you capped the essence of what they were what moved them about this? Did you like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to imagine if it's a requiem too, we're going through, like, a funeral of sorts, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Like, how did those people experience? Like, what did you hear back as feedback?
Yeah, yeah. I had a lot of really interesting conversations with audience members. In each of the shows that I did for this thesis, I held talkbacks
Mm.
afterwards, that to me were kind of like also part of the performances in a way that
Right,
it's like
right.
it's about negotiating how are we going to move forward here. Um,
Mhm,
in this one, I had the audience members do a writing exercise for the talkback. As through the whole show, we were reading these newspaper articles, going back
mhm,
150 years. So I asked them to write an article from the year 2100,
Mm.
80
Mm.
years into the future. What might be sort of a
mhm,
speculative story of what
mhm,
our relationship
mhm,
to the forest or the chestnuts would be. Um, so I was moved, by seeing their stories and the way that they
mhm,
some people were learning about chestnuts for the first time. Other people had a deeper
mhm,
familiarity with it,
mhm,
with the story.
huh,
But I think that for the audience members, the the feedback that I received is that like sort of the specificity of the performance was the most moving part. That it's not
right.
we're not talking about the
Yep.
loss of species in
In
general.
a big picture, right. That's what I was hoping to hear is, like, we're walking amongst these trees and hearing their story and listening to the song and touching them, and I would hope that, your audience would be like, "Oh, it's very real,"
Yeah.
right? Because when we hear of death in our biosphere, it's so far away, it's so far like, far removed when we're reading on our computer, it's like but, oh, it's so beautiful to have that experience.
Yeah. We need to have you do it some more.
With all kinds of elements of our sphere here.
Yeah.
So what was, a challenge then in how you can share this information and trying to encourage solutions?
Yeah, I mean, there are several routes I can go here because there was a lot of challenges making this thesis. I think like one that came up pretty immediately, and that I was sort of, one of the anticipated challenges that I had and did experience was just the challenge of reconciling my own positionality as settler, as the one telling this story, and relaying the information, and sort of holding the space.
Mm.
The my performance relied. fairly heavily on Indigenous epistemology, in terms of like, yeah, just how to conceptualize the loss of this species.
Right.
Um, there was an article that I relied pretty heavily on that was written by someone at SUNY. I can't remember which one. He put overdubbed this later, but he's from the Tuscarora Nation in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and he was talking about bringing in a lot of these ideas about mourning and that ended up guiding the performance, that the Haudenosaunee creation story involves loss and mourning and renewal. That it's more of like this circle of life and death, and that's where a lot of the critiques of this sort of Western scientific way of looking at the chestnut as like, here's the problem, here's how we solve it. And so anyway, it's like there are these strongly competing narratives of what should happen with the chestnut. Some people have devoted their entire lives, multiple lifetimes, to this project, bring back the chestnut. And then, you have another contingency of people who are saying, this is not what we should be working on.
Yeah.
Who are we bringing back the chestnut for? If you bring back this transgenic chestnut that, people have no relationship to, like what good does that do the forest? And what good does it do the forest if you're not restoring treaty rights, letting people who stewarded the
Right.
chestnut for thousands of years, still preventing them from doing the work that they would need to do into the future to maintain the species.
Yeah, good point.
So that's the challenge of just like, this is such a complex issue, and like I am sort of specifically situated in that. So I'm not in a place to kind of tell people what to think about it or to offer solutions. I mean, I think as an artist, our role is not to answer questions most of the time. Our role is to state the problems, as accurately as we can.
Just to create that awareness. Yeah.
Right. Or
Yeah.
hold that space for a multiple of answers and no answers, right? Like it's the paradox.
Yeah. Yeah. Another wonderful paradox. We love those.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Asher. This has been a great conversation. Is there anything that frightens you around the loss of diversity? You kind of talked about that a little bit early on, but I'm just wondering if there's like specific angst or specific anxieties that you feel around that, or that have come up while you're doing this work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this emotional question is a complex one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like fear is one of many emotions that I
Right.
feel about about extinction and biodiversity loss. I mean, I think like the primary emotion is like sadness and loss, and you know paired with that is just like the anger of justice of the situation. Knowing that these are our lives that we're talking about, both of the species going extinct and the other species, including humans, that are in deep relationship.
In the web.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing, no species ever goes out alone.
Right. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. Very, very thoughtful answer. I really appreciate that. Very important for us to remember and to really acknowledge and to feel all those things and recognize that others are feeling it and support each other. So thanks for bringing all those forward. Appreciate it.
And Escher, I mean, I've witnessed how hard it is to have these thoughts and feelings, because it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy, like, paradoxical life to live, right? Because we're always having to make these choices around our kin in the forest and ourselves and our humans, right? And so in those moments, how do you find yourself getting back to groundedness and feeling like you can manage another day? What gives you the strength to keep going?
I would say that usually it is going outside and
Yay!
just like being in the forest. I mean, the forest is that's the ecosystem where I live.
Mhm.
These
Mhm.
deciduous forests that put out lush leaves in the spring and lose them in the fall. And I mean, the when I was making these performances, I spent more time in the woods, than I had by far in the previous year, that I was in
Mhm.
grad school. That it was just like
Mm.
I knew that to make these performances, I had to have something to offer,
Yeah.
and the way to learn the primary way for me to learn was to be in relationship with these specific plants
Mhm.
in person. And
Mm.
so I can say that in the process of making and sharing these shows, I felt very little hopelessness.
Mm.
It wasn't like, sort of a slog
Mm.
learning about these things.
Mhm.
It, it was always a creative act, and it was always,
Mhm.
these experiences that I was having that were really precious to me in the woods,
Mm.
and also the knowledge of like being able to share those with
Mm.
community,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
for people to have these kinds of emotional, cathartic experiences, that I think is
Mhm.
kind of a big part of what we need when we're
Yeah.
thinking about ecological crisis. Of
Yeah.
course, like what we need is, you know, change and political action. But
Mhm.
you know, knowing that we can't do that as individuals, um, you know, the whole way,
Right.
figuring out where we slot in, I think that
Right.
is it's inherently this spiritual question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the feeling that I was doing that for myself, and that, I was opening that space for others, and received a lot of,
Mhm.
encouraging feedback from people about how they saw the woods differently after
Mm.
Mhm.
part of these shows. That gave me a whole lot of hope.
I really love it. You're describing having a relationship that goes deeper and deeper as you spend time with that other, right?
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
becomes one. Actually, the other then becomes one because you're now in relationship, in deep, intimate relationship. And what a lovely response that you gave these people this opportunity to see your relationship and perhaps begin their own relationship with this forest. And I feel like we should just keep doing this. Like more people, in order for, there to be conscientious traction with, what we need to do to collectively help our entire web of life,
Yeah.
we have to have more of these opportunities because people have forgotten how to, have an intimate relationship with the grass and the trees and the clouds, right? Like
Mhm.
there's just such a yeah. So
Yeah. It's beautiful.
I
It,
I
and and
love
it
this.
and it also offers people an opportunity to really feel those things you talked about, to feel the
Yep.
anger, feel the frustration and the despair, but also to feel the hope and to feel the way that they can slot in. I love that word.
Yeah.
Okay, how can I be a part of the change that needs to happen? And how can I do that in a way that I stay balanced and healthy? And yeah, so it's really a full spectrum, um,
Immersive.
yeah, immersive experience and really wonderful. Thank you again. I really appreciate all you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I
this
think
this kind of gets at one of this sort of thesis behind the thesis,
Uh-huh.
which, I mean, I felt that what we need is collective ways of creating a culture of responsibility and care, and that this is, this is something that I believe comes with time and relationship to place. That it's a ritual and a spiritual thing, and that for me, I can't create that, that continuity of culture. And my goal was to create things that were very personal and like non-appropriative, and that what presented itself to me was theater, that like in a more secularized world or culture, that like art is this really powerful tool to have these experiences of transcendence. And so that is kind of this side door that I was trying to get at.
Yeah, beautiful. That's really true. We've had a couple other people on here that speak to the artist, the need to be creative, and how that does open a door. Yeah, open a door for people to deal with some of this really intense stuff. So, yeah, thank you. Where are we?
What do you wish we'd asked you?
That's right. One last question. This one is the cover all. Is there anything we missed?
Well, this isn't really an answer to that question, but it is another thing that I thought of to say. It's actually a follow-up to your question about the challenges, and that in this, you've talked to many people who are very experienced in grief work and in moving people through these transitions, and I am not one of those people. This was kind of my first experience putting on this show of like, I think I didn't realize until I was doing it, because I had just been doing it alone by myself. But the energetic container of now, it's not just my experience of mourning, it's this audience of 12 people. And I found myself after that performance just completely depleted, just feeling it was like, the process of creating a ritual, creating a show, it's like constant work all the time.
Yeah.
And then after the first showing, after actually doing it and seeing the way that these audience members were moving through these emotions, at that point I was like, wow, this is like huge work. So it gives me certainly a deeper appreciation, for what it is that you do, and the guests that you're bringing on who are devoted specifically to this work.
Yeah.
And Asher, I'm really grateful that you did have that experience, because two things. One, I hope you continue to do this work and share, getting to know you, getting to know the American chestnut kind of experiences for people, and recognizing how energy works. Energy's working through the trees, through the soil, through you. You start learning how to take care of yourself energetically as well, so that you can continue to do this, because there are ways to do it in a very well balanced and regenerative way. So it's kind of cool that you experienced that, though,
Yeah.
because that could be like a launching point for another immersive experience for you to
Yeah.
share.
It also occurred to me that maybe bringing a grief counselor along with you as one of the as a co-facilitator might be another way to do that.
Yeah.
To have somebody who's really steeped and knowledgeable and skilled in recognizing and helping people through that one. But yeah, wonderful. Wow. I mean, I've read about this and seen some stuff that pictures you sent about it, and just hearing this description has really, really moved me deeply. So thank you so much.
It's moved me too. And I sat there and wrote a note about, Wakil, you and I have our morning walks, and we talk to certain trees, and we have our ways, right? And And I am intimate with some aspects of the landscape around me, but I wrote myself like, can I find a way to do this in more of a relationship, right? To like be very intentional because I think that's how we get to support, even if it's not supporting politically and collectively with the culture, we're supporting that individual tree or that individual plains or the birds in it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
important. It's important at least to me.
Yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
going to be important to you too.
Yeah, yeah. And to the people who hear this, hopefully.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
like
Go ahead.
um, yeah, I mean, it was remarkable to me in some ways of just like how much connection for me was built just in the simple act of like
yeah,
doing the rehearsals for this
yeah,
performance. That
yeah.
being able to go up to a tree to offer this being, water and song and,
Mhm.
stones symbolically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew from the beginning that I was choosing to enmesh myself in this tragic story,
Right.
Mhm.
and I think on the level of like the artist, I know kind of what is theatrically interesting and what makes a good story and how to tell that story. And then there was this, the other element of it, of my own personal practice that like I think that it can kind of feel big and abstract of like how do you start forming connections
Mm-hmm.
with other species.
Yeah.
And it was actually like in terms of on the ground what I was doing, very simple. It's
Yeah.
Mhm.
mostly a matter of time and of listening.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Oh,
and intention. Yeah. Setting the intention,
yeah.
showing up. Right.
Mm,
Beautiful. Well, I love the
mm.
two quotes that you shared with us too, because they're two incredibly brilliant authors who speak pretty much about this stuff in brilliant ways, and about what we're talking about how to create this connections. So we have something from Sophie Strand and Robin Wall Kimmerer. Would you like to read those to us, or would you like us to read them?
I can read them. Yeah, I just need to pull them up. But yeah, these are two authors that I'm very indebted to, among many other people. But both of them I cite in my thesis, and that's how I got these quotes. Okay, Sophie Strand. We have been numb for so long, we no longer understand that the body we are harming is an extension of our own. When we clear cut a forest or drive another population of birds to extinction, we are twisting a knife in our own side. Robin Wall Kimmerer. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair. Not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift.
Mm.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Choosing joy. That's our work.
It is the work.
Yeah. So thanks so much, and
Thank you, Asher.
we'll be in touch. And thanks all. I will be in touch very
Blessings.
soon because we're still working on travel stuff. All right. Take care.
Yeah, take care, and it's great to meet you.
Thank you for joining us today. Please stick around after the credits for our afterthoughts, and it helps our numbers if you stay until the end. We want to thank my children, Nate, Vivian, Nina, and her fiance Asher, for the excellent opening song, and a special thanks to our awesome editor, Sam Zemke, who is also a guest on our podcast. You can listen to him on Season 4, Episode 5. Also, thank you to Charles Heaston, the composer of the original music you are listening to now.
And of course, thanks to you, our audience, and all of our amazing guests. Please come back next week for another great episode. Share this with your friends, family, and community. We hope you will subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack. Each guest's additional information will be found in the podcast notes. And of course, if you have a good end-of-life story to share, please reach out. We are always eager to hear from you. Ah.
I'm so glad to have such a great son-in-law.
Yeah, you are so blessed with all these really beautiful people around you.
Yeah,
And, I really love this also. Like, we didn't get a chance to get into it, but um, hospice, right? Like,
yeah,
it's it's it serves as a reminder that we can hospice
the planet.
the ecology around us,
Yeah,
each in our own small ways. Um, and I'm also really curious. Like, I like that he pulled up the two. I guess I would say opposing viewpoints of, like, let it go,
yeah,
and then the other was like, "No, we gotta hold on to it," which I was like, the medical industrial complex wants us to always hold on,
yeah,
and
and
there's
science,
another
yeah.
part in science, right?
Mm,
So there's another part of me is like, do we just bear witness to the loss of it
yeah,
and just recognize that we ourselves are also going to die, right? Like, I don't know. So it was a really interesting kind of paradox to sit with as I was listening to him, but beautiful to include people in this work and to share in this in an intimate relationship.
yeah, yeah, I really love it, and it's such a great example of how artistry and creativity can guide us through these really difficult things and help us really set our own intentions to make things better.
Mhm.
The I just spoke to somebody today who will be on a future podcast a couple of weeks after this one, maybe, or maybe 1 week. And so I hope everybody will tune in because she is specifically going to speak to us about the difference. What is hospice and what is
Mm,
palliative care, and
good.
and why people are fearing it and why they shouldn't fear it and why they should
Right.
embrace it. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. So I hope you will all join us for that.
Yes.
And been such a wonderful time. Thank you so much. Adios.
Adios.